In this video what I want to do is look at the lens flare feature in Bryce's Light Lab. Now you might think that the lens flare should be associated with the Bryce camera because, as I was just checking up on the Wikipedia here, lens flare is caused by light getting into the lens system and interacting with the lenses. So reflection and scattering, it says here, from the material. I don't even know how to pronounce that word there, so I'll let you read that, in the lens. So why would you want to do this? Because it's essentially degrading your image, so it might seem like a little bit of a strange thing to want to do, but it can make images look more realistic by using this if used very carefully. And also, it says here, deliberate use. So you can use this to deliberately invoke a sense of drama, which of course would be a good thing as an artist for you to do. So let's get straight to Bryce then, and on the create shelf we've got a radial light, and we'll use this radial light to explore some of the peculiarities of the function of this feature. So I'll just give that a quick render, and you can see the radial light's casting light. And if we edit the light, there's a little radio button here which if we click on enables this option. We can have image or procedural. Right, we'll start with procedural. That's very hard to use the procedural, and you'll see that things look a bit strange. So if we'll go into the library, I'll just pick something, it doesn't really matter what. We'll have this check blue because that's a very basic one. So that's the material, and if I check out of this and go rendering scene here, oh, there's nothing showing up, so that's okay. But if I check out now and render, you'll see we've got this great big circle with the checks on it in front of us. Now that doesn't look very much like a lens flare, it's pretty solid as well. Okay, right, I'm going to move this around and you'll see that it's now pointing to the camera, and I'm going to move it away from the camera now, and you should notice that it's not got further away. In fact, to control the size of this effect, you control the size of the light source. So that's something to bear in mind. Now something else to bear in mind as well, which okay, so it doesn't look very much like a lens flare at the moment, but we'll deal with it, the way it behaves first. I'm going to create a cube. So here we've got a cube in our scene, and I'll enlarge it and lift it up and point out to you now that the light source is behind the cube, and yet the effect is in front. And indeed, there's no situation where you can put this cube in front of the camera where you don't see the effect, which is quite good, because since lens flare is supposed to be in the camera lens, then it's appropriate that we should be in a situation where the effect is always in front of the camera. So as I say, it doesn't matter where you put this in terms of where it's going to appear, front or back. If you move it around though, it will move around to one side. But if you want to change the size of it, you have to modify the size of the light source, scale it up or down. So that's the first thing to be aware of. And indeed, if we put the light source inside this cube, we should still get the effect, but we'll have no effect from the light source. So if you're using this effect, it's probably a good idea to make sure you're not got any output from the light source, because you probably don't need it, because it'll still produce the effect. But to set up a procedural effect with this is very difficult, because it applies it to this the effect to this circle. It maps it. I think it's parametric mapped. You can't use the material options in Bryce to modify this. It's an effect of its own, and you've only got these two controls, procedural, which is going to pick your procedural, and image. So you're probably going to find it a lot easier to work with image. I've tried setting it up with procedural using a function in the deep text editor that allows you, if we go into noise here, I'll show you where it is if you want to experiment, distance origin. And you can use that to make the pattern fade out from the center to the outside, which, as you'll see with some pre-made ones, works well, but we'll get those from image. And where I'm going to get these from, because we could apply this but it'd be really weird, and bear in mind I'll just show you what this image looks like applied, because it's got an alpha map. Can't see it in there. Right, here we go. So there's the default picture image. You'll notice by moving it around it tends to rotate as well, which means when you move it left and right it tends to rotate, which means you've got limited control over the orientation of this effect. So you're best to use things that are symmetrical around the origin. And these we have been provided with by Clay Hedgebrush within your Bryce content that you can download. So here we've got 3 files that you should be able to download. Reset your downloads at DAS. You've got the application itself, which you want to be using the latest version, which is this 7.1.0.109, and you've got the Bryce content, which is just the pro materials which I provided, and you've got this this Bryce content here, which is much bigger. That's the materials file, small, quite compact, mostly procedural. That's the pro content, and the Bryce content here, which is all the other things like tutorials from Horo and things like that. Now, if you can't locate these, or you need to know how to install them, Horo's created this nice PDF which is available for download. So if you use that web address, you can just download the PDF, and that goes over the process of installing your content and where to find where it's got to, because lots of people are not aware that they've got all this additional content and tutorials and HDRI and all these things that are useful resources for within Bryce that came with their Bryce 7.1 Pro. So just be aware of that, and it's some of this content we're going to use now. So if we go back to Bryce and go into editing the light source and go image, and then I'll click on an empty square and go to Bryce content, because I've saved it here where we can find it, lens flares, clay hagebrush, and in here is the selection of flares. Now you can't see the flares because they are white, and the reason they're white is for the same reason this figure filled in, is that you can end up with flares that are darker than the surrounding image, which would be a bit weird because flare should be like an addition of light, and it doesn't add light. So what you do is you have this white and add on your flare. So I'll pick one of these out. We've got a sun there and a star. If you click on them, they actually show up, which is handy. Let's find one of these. That's quite nice. That's flare 5. So I'll open that now, and you see it's fully white here, and this just the alpha channel, which is allowing this white to be applied over the top. So now if we check out of that, again you can't see it here, we check out of that, we now have our flare effect. Now the flare effects work best when they're mostly white, and you've got this selection provided by Clay, but you could also make your own, and you just essentially need something that's on a square that's going to work as an alpha, so it's going to be white in the middle and dark out the outside, so you can't see the outline of the circle. The other thing is, obviously, you need to be in a situation where it seems appropriate to use a flare. So we'll just have a quick reset of this sky. So if we go to custom sky, hold Alt down, turn the clouds off, move the sun in. Now if we'll move the sun into the view now, look at that, the sun's enormous. So in the sky level, let's see if we can control the size of the sun to make it look more realistic. So sun moon size, we can set the sun size down. It looks like it's the glow that's making it look so big, so we could set the sky to a darker blue and set the glow colour down. That'll make the sun a bit smaller. There we go. I think I'll make it a little bit brighter than that. Let's include a bit of every colour if you can when doing things, because if you just exclude colours you can get weird effects. So just turning that up again. It's difficult to get the sun small enough really, so it's not overpowering the effect. So when you've got the sun close to being in the camera directly in view, that's the time more or less when you end up with this effect, though you can't set it up in the preview screen as you can see here. So there you go, it's getting close to burnout. Anyway, that's an aside issue. So long as you've got a sky that looks appropriate to get your lens flare effect in, then you're laughing. So that, for example, looks okay. Now I thought what we could do is just look at making some more of these, because tend to have several elements to them. So I'll just open another instance of Bryce, which will take a moment to load, and then after that we'll look at how you can go about colouring them, because if you colour, I wish this wouldn't happen. I've had to reinstall my operating system and I've not got it all set up yet. Okay, right, where was I? Oh, I was going to make that right file document setup. I'll just make it 1:1 there, make it fairly small so it renders quickly. I'm going to use the overhead camera view, sky and fog, Skylab, use specular effect but no diffuse for this, and then I'm going to create a sphere in the middle of the scene, and in the material lab I'll set the diffuse to fully black. Specular halo, I'm going to set that up, give it specularity and metallicity together, and transparency. Right, and then You can use this effect in various ways. I'll just keep that at 100 for now. To, if I now zoom in on this, create a blob. So these specular highlights, that blue dots, because the sphere is in contact with the ground. In fact, what I could do is turn the atmosphere off and make that fully black, and then I can get rid of the ground and not worry about any collisions. Then if I move the sun around the top, you can see I get a bit of a halo dot there, although it looks a bit small and weak. So we can increase that, probably the effect of that with anisotropic, which has made it rather strong. So I'll just move that off to one side and see how this goes, because I'm just going to try and create something that looks a bit like, turn this value up to quite high. That'll spread the halo out a lot. In fact, the anisotropic is a bit too strong now. We can see this in scene, so I can control the effect there, but I can't do any lens flare with that. But what I'm trying to do is make an element that might seem like a bit of a lens flare effect that you might see. I've gone too weak now. Right. Let's try materials additive. That should brighten things up a bit, perhaps too much. Let's have a look. It's a bit brighter. We've got diffusion, we've got specular, we've got anisotropic. Let's go from one extreme to another here, don't we? I don't really want to spend too long on this. So it's not really what I was wanting to show you. Right, okay. Let's have a look what we got in this one, because this one works, and I don't know why that one doesn't. Additive, enhance, normal, diffusion, specular, specular halo 252. That's Camtasia holding me up there. Right. Material. I seem to have got a lot more shadow casting options set on this that I don't need, and I don't need displacement or anisotropic. But it's still not. I can't imagine that it's to do with the sunlight being there. I wonder if I need more light on the top of this. It's really not helping me here. Let's go back to this one. Find out what's missing. Reflection 10. Okay, that's what is probably needed. So I'll give it some reflection. So I slept since I did this last test, and that's getting a bit more light reflecting inside. That's handy. And then if I move that to one side, it'll change its pattern. Right. So essentially, the idea is to create blobs that you can then utilize in your effect by modifying the light. In this case, I've got maximum specular. Don't do soft shadows. I don't really need shadow casting or any of these things in this. It's just a matter of setting up something that creates a blob in the center of your screen that might look a bit like it was a flare effect, like so. Okay, and then I'll save that as somewhere up here. I've got some more already, which you already detected because I showed you one. 4. And then when you go into your scene where you're doing your lens flare effect, I can just copy and paste this one, so I've got another little effect there, and then go into edit it, images, and then load in another one of these that I've just made. But Clay's already set his up, and we'll just have to modify it slightly. So there we've got this in the diffuse channel, but we want it in the alpha channel, and then just click on that blob there to make that white, and that gives us a new blob to use. And if I want that to be smaller, because it would look a bit large there, I can do that. Right. Likewise with this one that I've made previously, and I just can't quite figure out why the settings vary so much between this and the other one. Must be something I'm missing, possibly in the sky, I don't know. I'm only using specular 660 there, and don't know what sort of. I've got a white sky because I've got the atmosphere off, so perhaps it's reflecting a bit of that because I've got a black ground plane. So if you look in the materials for ground plane, I've put a black ground plane in, so I'm getting an edge there from the reflection of the sky, which is why that one looks different. And so I could use that one in here as well. So I'll copy and paste this, get them all on a sort of angle, edit it, image, open a new blob, pick that one out, open it, copy, paste that in there, and then set that to white so you can see what the procedure is there. That's a slightly smaller blob because it was in the centre. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get hold of that light source, make it a bit smaller to control the size of that blob. Right, you're getting the idea now. You saw I've got some hexagonal versions of this, and I'll show you how those were set up as well. Just a bit of experiments here. So these are the primitives that are additional primitives provided by Rashad Carter. We've got some pyramids here like this with angled faces, and which is very handy, and the same material that I don't want that one there, the same material that I was using, this is a six-sided one, on that light source, not light source, on the previous lens flare with reflection and transparency. And again, it looks like I've got an all-white sky. In fact, I can go back and test that in here because I turned the sky to fully black, put the all-white sky on. Bearing in mind now I've got to put a ground plane in and modify the material of that ground plane to fully black, and then we switch over the top, we'll see the effect of adding that. It's reflecting a bit of the sky. So you can use all these things to create different flares. Hello? Oh, stop it, Windows. Frustrating. Right, the interference from Windows. Let's go back to where we were, and we'll copy and paste one of these, and we'll try one of the hexagonal ones out. So I'll just edit that image, and it's a hexagonal one I made earlier. Copy, paste, delete, set to white, delete. There we go. Right, and that's given me a little hexagonal one, once again in white. And if you wanted that to be semi-transparent, you would need the hexagon shape using to be grey in there, because black is fully transparent and white is fully solid. So if you wanted a bit of the background to show through, that's a rather intense effect at the moment. So that's a little hexagonal highlight. So you'd probably try and put that, it's going to be hard to get hold of when it's that small, up here somewhere. You can always move these closer to the camera, it doesn't matter. Then make it rather small, just to highlight that there. And what else we got? I'll just copy and paste this one as the biggest and edit it, image, the last one that I was trying, it's got more of a faded edge and it's not as large. Copy, paste, delete, delete that to white there, yes, and check out, and you can see that one. All these, as stated though, are white, and if you use colour you run into a bit of problem. So is there a way of colouring these? Well, yes there is, otherwise I wouldn't have asked that question. Okay, so on the create shelf we create a sphere, and we'll modify the material properties of the sphere to fuzzy and ambient, and choose an ambient colour. Let's make it sort of a red colour there. Make it fully transparent. So you've got a nice faded, fuzzy, glowy area there. And then if we make sure we've got some global ambient to drive this effect, and bring it so that it's in front of the camera, so you'd have to position these in front of the camera for them to work. Let's have a look how that looks. Got anything happening there yet? No, because that's a light source. I want to do that with a sphere, so I'll create a sphere. Right, and go through that again. So fuzzy, diffuse ambience, transparent makes it nearly invisible. Set the ambient to there. We can control the level of transparency, or we could do additive. That would probably be a better option. There you go. We'll do it that way with additive. So it's a soft edged glowing area. Again, it's inside there, so bring it out, lift it up, bring it into view and see what we can do with it to colour things. There we go. Right, it's probably a bit strong at the moment, but you get the idea. So that's adding on a bit of red colour on top of that. So we could make that darker, probably help. Let's see what happens if we make it very dark. Does it vanish? Yes. So make it a bit red, and it just shows up a bit of a red filter, and then we can put that in the sort of the path of these diagonal ones that we're using to create our effect. and that'll add a bit of colour to it, and you can modify the size of them. So while you can't really use the colour effectively in the flare effects themselves, you could put little filters in front of them like this, and that will add to your effect. So all in all, it's a bit fiddly to set this effect up, as you can see, because I've been at it now and trying to explain it for the last 20 minutes. Sorry about that. But you do have total control of where these highlights appear in your scene. So swings and roundabouts is good to have control. The disadvantage is quite time consuming to build the effect up. So that is using the lens flare effect in the Light Lab in Bryce 7.1 Pro. Now there are other ways to create this sort of effect by wrapping things around the camera, but I think I've gone on long enough, so give this one a go and see what you think. That's the end of the tutorial.